abandoned her sick son to follow another man, years later received a terrible news. An old, dilapidated house with a sagging tiled roof. That was where Mary and her son, Lucas, lived. The house had nothing but a creaky wooden bed that groaned every time someone sat on it and a small fireplace that constantly emitted a sharp, smoky smell. Lucas was a thin, frail boy with large, deep eyes that seemed to hold an entire sky of melancholy. He had been born with a heart condition, leaving his body perpetually pale and prone to fainting if he exerted himself too much. Even so, Lucas loved his mother unconditionally. His happiest moments were when she held him in her arms, singing lullabies in a hoarse yet warm voice. "Mom, I drew a picture today." Lucas ran over to show her his drawing, a picture of a woman in a light blue dress, holding a tiny boy. "This is you, and this is me." Mary, a woman in her 30s, gaunt and with eyes that always carried a trace of exhaustion, glanced at the drawing and gave a faint smile. But that smile quickly faded as she looked down at her calloused hands. The days of backbreaking work had worn her soul thin. "Lucas, I still have a lot of work to do. Show it to me later, okay?" Her voice was colder than usual. Lucas lowered his head, clutching the paper tightly. He didn't understand why lately his mother no longer hugged him as much or kissed his forehead before bed. But he still smiled. "Okay, Mom, go do your work. I'll wait for you." Mary sighed. Her life revolved around financial burdens and Lucas's illness. Medicine, living expenses, it all weighed heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt at ease. In the village, everyone knew about Mary's situation. Mrs. Caroline, a middle-aged woman who sold pastries at the market, would often cluck her tongue when she saw Mary pass by. "Poor Mary, raising a child alone is hard enough, and that boy's sick all the time." "Exactly, if he gets seriously ill, that family's done for," another person chimed in. Those whispered comments reached Mary's ears, adding to her pressure. With each passing day, she grew more irritable and distant from Lucas. One evening, Lucas sat by the fireplace, waiting for his mother to come home. The clock had struck 8, but Mary was still nowhere to be seen. Creak. The old wooden door swung open, and Mary stepped inside, her face dotted with sweat, her clothes reeking of grease. She'd just returned from a long day working at the village restaurant. Lucas immediately ran to her, his eyes shining. "Mom's home. Were you tired today? I made some soup, want to eat it?" But Mary just stared at him. A strange, cold feeling flickered in her eyes. "Lucas, don't bother me. I'm exhausted." Lucas froze. His hands unconsciously let go of the small spoon he'd been holding. "But I missed you so much. Can you sit with me for a little bit?" His voice trembled. Mary closed her eyes, as if trying to suppress something. "Lucas, you're a big boy now. You don't need to cling to me like that anymore." Lucas didn't understand. He was only 7, how could he take care of himself? "But Mom, you still hug me every night," his voice grew quieter, laced with hurt. Mary stood up abruptly, her frustration spilling over. "Lucas, I told you, I'm tired. Stop making this harder for me." Lucas stepped back, his small heart pounding painfully. That night, Lucas waited for his mother as always. But Mary didn't hug him anymore. She lay with her back to him, eyes closed. Lucas bit his lip, trying to swallow his tears. He didn't understand why his mother no longer seemed to love him like before. "Maybe she's just tired," he told himself. He pulled the blanket up and whispered alone, "Good night, Mom." There was no response. The next morning, Lucas woke up when the sun was already high. His mother had left early. He got out of bed, but at that moment, a sharp pain shot through his chest. Lucas froze, clutching his chest. His breathing grew rapid, his whole body trembling. "I can't faint. I can't faint, he muttered to himself, dragging his feet toward the table to get water. But as he reached out, he collapsed. Thud. A hand caught him. Lucas. Are you okay? It was Samuel, a kind neighbor. Lucas looked up, his face pale. Uncle Samuel. Samuel was a man in his 40s, with a scruffy beard but gentle eyes. He often helped Mary look after Lucas when she was too busy. Why are you alone? Where's your mom? Samuel asked, his voice full of concern. Lucas lowered his head. Mom went to work. She's really busy. Samuel sighed and patted the boy's head. Your mom loves you so much. She's just going through a tough time. Lucas gripped the hem of his shirt. I know. I just wish she could be with me more. Samuel didn't know what to say. He simply pulled the boy into a hug, letting Lucas feel a bit of the warmth he was slowly losing from his mother. That evening, Mary came home late. She walked into the house without even glancing at Lucas. Lucas looked at his mother, hesitating for a moment before timidly speaking up, Mom, I had chest pain today. Uncle Samuel helped me. Mary paused briefly but then only nodded indifferently. Is that so? Lucas felt his heart tighten as if it were being squeezed. His mother didn't even ask if he was okay. He bit his lip and looked up. Can you hug me for a little bit, Mom? Mary stopped. She stared at him. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then she turned away. Lucas, you need to learn to be independent. Lucas crumbled. Mary was gradually changing. She no longer spent time with Lucas like before, no more evenings of storytelling or warm hugs. Her words of concern grew fewer, replaced by tired sighs and irritated frowns. Lucas could clearly feel the distance, but he still tried to hold on to her. Mom, today I helped Mrs. Caroline sell pastries, and she gave me a sweet bun. Here, you eat it. He held out the small bun, his eyes full of hope. Mary glanced at it briefly and shook her head. I'm not eating it. You have it. Her voice was flat. Lucas didn't give up. He grabbed her hand and gently shook it. Just one bite, please. Mary yanked her hand back, her eyes flashing with annoyance. Lucas. I said I don't want it. Can you leave me alone for a bit? Lucas froze. He had never seen his mother snap at him like that. He let go, swallowing his tears. I'm sorry. Mary looked at her son for a moment, then sighed and turned away. That day, Mary received an offer. She was cleaning at the village restaurant when a man appeared, Richard Silva. He was in his 40s, tall and broad, dressed in a crisp suit, his hair slicked back, reeking of strong cologne. When he saw Mary, he smirked. So, you're the hard-working woman everyone talks about. Mary looked up, a hint of wariness in her eyes. How can I help you? Richard sat down casually. I don't need help. But I can help you. Mary frowned. What do you mean? Richard slowly scanned the restaurant, then gave a faint smile. How long have you been doing this job? 10 years. 20. And yet you're still just a poor woman, scraping by for every penny, right? Mary clenched her fists, feeling uneasy. I don't have any other choice. Richard laughed, a calculated edge to it. You do. You're just too afraid to take it. Mary stared at him. What are you talking about? Richard crossed his arms, his voice slow but dripping with cunning. I can give you a life you've never dreamed of. Money, a house, nice clothes. You wouldn't have to slave away every day anymore. Mary eyed him suspiciously. And in return? Richard leaned back in his chair, smirking. You know the terms, don't you? Mary gripped her skirt, her heart beating faster. He wanted her to leave her past behind. He wanted her to shed the burden called Lucas. That night, Mary didn't come home. Lucas sat alone by the fireplace, clutching his mother's old sweater tightly. It was very late. The door creaked open. Mary stepped in, a faint scent of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her. Lucas ran to her, his eyes lighting up. "Mom! Where were you? I've been waiting for you forever." Mary gently pushed him away, her voice cold. "Lucas, stop waiting for me. I have my own business to take care of." Lucas stood there, stunned. "But, you promised we'd have dinner together." Mary sighed, glancing at the table. It was just a simple meal, all a bowl of cold soup and a few hard slices of bread. She frowned. "Lucas, you need to understand that I can't always sit and eat with you." Lucas bit his lip hard. "I don't need anything. I just want you to be with me." Mary felt a flicker of emotion, but she forced it down. She couldn't afford to soften. She turned her back, her voice sharp. "Lucas, I'm tired of this life." Lucas stared at her back, his heart aching. Mary grew more distant. She often came home late, forgot to prepare meals, forgot to check on her son. Lucas tried to manage everything on his own. He cooked for himself, though his small hands were clumsy. He washed clothes on his own, though his shirt was always soaked with sweat by the end. One day, Lucas came down with a fever. He lay curled up in bed, his breathing faint and weak. Mary came home, saw him like that, but only glanced over before turning away. Tears welled up in Lucas's eyes, his voice trembling. "Mom! I'm so tired." Mary bit her lip but still walked out. She couldn't let weakness hold her back. One evening, Richard came to Mary's house. He sat down in a chair, poured himself a glass of wine, his eyes full of challenge. "So, have you thought it over?" Mary lowered her head, her voice slightly shaky. "Lucas is my son." Richard smirked. "But he's a burden, isn't he?" Mary pressed her lips together, not answering. Richard took a sip of wine, his voice low and deliberate. "You can keep living like a poor, struggling woman, slaving away for a sickly child. Or you can have a new life. Your choice." Mary gripped her skirt, her breathing uneven. She couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to escape poverty. She wanted to live. Lucas realized his mother was no longer the mother he once knew. She didn't hold him in her arms anymore, didn't sing lullabies each night. Meals together became rare, and hugs grew distant. Lucas tried everything to bring her back to him. "Mom, I learned a new song today. Want to hear me sing it?" Mary didn't look up, replying indifferently. "I'm busy, Lucas. Maybe later." Lucas forced a smile. "Then I'll sing quietly, you can still hear it." He began humming a gentle melody, but Mary paid no attention. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and prepared to leave. Lucas panicked. "Where are you going, Mom? You haven't had dinner yet." Mary paused briefly but didn't turn around. "I have things to do." "But you promised," Lucas's voice choked. Mary closed her eyes and kept walking out the door. Lucas collapsed to the floor, silent tears streaming down his face. That day, Lucas was alone in the small house, cold and empty. He clutched his chest, where his little heart beat faster than usual. A sharp, stinging pain spread through his ribcage. "It's okay. I just need to breathe slowly," he reassured himself. But the pain didn't ease. His breathing grew rapid, his hands trembling. He tried calling for his mother, but no one answered. "Mom, it hurts so much," his voice faded, but no one heard. Lucas slumped over, his breathing growing weaker. Outside, rain began to fall, thunder rumbling fiercely. But inside the small house, there was only a lonely boy, struggling with pain no one cared about. Lucas woke up in utter exhaustion. The sun was high, but his mother still hadn't come home. He struggled out of bed, trying to keep his balance. Every step sent a jolt of pain through his heart. The door creaked open. Mary stepped in, her face expressionless. Lucas took a deep breath and approached her. "Mom, yesterday I was in so much pain. I called for you, but you weren't here." Mary didn't meet his eyes, silently hanging her purse on the hook. "I told you, Lucas. I'm busy." Lucas bit his lip, his eyes red. "But I was so scared. I just wanted you to be with me." Mary frowned, her voice impatient. "Lucas, you need to understand that I can't always be by your side." Lucas clenched his fists, his voice breaking. "Then where do you want to be? With who?" Mary blinked but didn't answer. She just turned and walked into her room, leaving Lucas standing there, completely lost. He sat down in a chair, his hands clutching his still aching heart. Ever since he was little, he'd never been afraid of being alone because he always had his mother. But now, it felt like she wasn't here anymore. He looked around the house, everything was the same, but it no longer held his mother's warmth. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself. "Does Mom not love me anymore?" The question echoed in his mind, like a whisper from his cracking heart. In the days that followed, Lucas started going to Mrs. Caroline's bakery more often. "Lucas, come over here and give me a hand." Mrs. Caroline was a plump woman, always smiling, and she cared deeply for Lucas. Lucas gave a faint smile and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He wiped tables and arranged pastries, though sometimes he couldn't hide his exhaustion. Mrs. Caroline patted his head, her voice gentle. "Don't overdo it, dear. You look so pale." Lucas forced a smile and shook his head. "I'm fine, don't worry." But the truth was, he wasn't fine at all. He was just trying to find a place where he could feel loved. That evening, Mary came home and saw Lucas sitting on the floor, mending his torn shoes. "Lucas, what are you doing?" Her voice carried a hint of irritation. Lucas looked up, smiling faintly. "I'm sewing my shoes. You don't buy me new ones anymore, so I'm fixing them myself." Mary blinked but said nothing. Lucas swallowed hard, then timidly asked, "Can you hug me for a little bit, Mom?" Mary stood still. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then she turned away. "Lucas, you're a big boy now." Lucas felt as if someone had just crushed his heart. Had she ever said those words to him before? That night, Lucas dreamed of his mother holding him close, whispering in his ear. "I'll never leave you." He smiled in his dream, but when he woke up, there was only cold darkness. He burst into tears, but silently. Because crying wouldn't change anything. The next morning, Mary got ready for work. Lucas stood at the door, watching her. "Mom, can you come home early today?" Mary didn't turn around, only replying, "I'll try." But he knew it was a lie. She wouldn't come home early. She wouldn't come back to him anymore. Lucas clenched his fists, his small heart tightening in pain. He whispered something even he didn't dare believe. "Maybe Mom doesn't need me anymore." Mary sat in a fancy coffee shop, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes full of unease. Across from her, Richard stirred his coffee lightly, his lips curling into a relaxed smile. "Miss Mary, we've talked about this plenty of times." Mary bit her lip, not responding. Richard set his coffee cup down, his voice low but clear. "If you really want a new life, stop dragging that burden along." Mary gripped her skirt tightly, her voice hoarse. "Lucas is my son." Richard chuckled, but his eyes were ice cold. "And that's why you're poor and struggling like this." Mary clenched her hands so hard her nails nearly dug into her skin. Richard leaned back in his chair, his tone light. You know I'm right. You can keep enduring a life of poverty, or you can live comfortably. But to do that, you have to make a decision. Mary closed her eyes, her whole body trembling. She was so tired. She didn't want to return to this cycle of poverty anymore. But, abandon Lucas? She couldn't. She couldn't. Or was she actually, wavering? Lucas sat curled up in a corner of the house, clutching his mother's old shirt tightly. Rain pattered on the roof, cold gusts slipping through the cracks in the door. He couldn't sleep. "Mom," he whispered, his voice weak. The door creaked open. Lucas startled and looked up. Mary stood there, her posture rigid, her eyes avoiding direct contact with her son. "Lucas, come with me." Lucas blinked, bewildered. "Mom, where are you taking me?" Mary didn't answer, only grabbed his hand and pulled him along. Lucas stepped back slightly, a sense of unease rising in his chest. "Mom, I'm so tired. Can't we wait until morning?" Mary frowned, tightening her grip on his hand. "No. We're leaving right now." Lucas didn't understand what was happening, but he still trusted his mom. He followed quietly, unaware that this would be the journey that changed his life forever. The car rolled along the bumpy road, Lucas clutching his small backpack tightly. He didn't know where his mom was taking him. He turned to Mary, trying to ask. "Mom, where are we going?" Mary stared out the window, not responding. Lucas gripped his backpack tighter, his heart beating faster. "Mom, you not saying anything is scaring me," his voice trailed off. Mary took a deep breath, then said coldly. "Lucas, you need to be strong." Lucas didn't understand. Why was she saying that? The car stopped in front of a large building, its old walls stained by time. The tall iron gate slowly creaked open. Lucas stared, a nameless fear swelling inside him. "Mom, what is this place?" Mary didn't look at her son, only said coldly. "Get out of the car, Lucas." Lucas was confused but obeyed. He stepped out slowly, his eyes still fixed on his mom. Beyond the gate, a middle-aged woman stood waiting. She glanced at Lucas, then turned to Mary. "This is the boy." Mary nodded slightly. Lucas felt his heart stop. "Mom, what's going on?" Mary took a deep breath, then bent down, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Lucas, I can't take care of you anymore." Lucas froze. "Mom, what are you saying?" Mary turned her face away, avoiding her son's gaze. I have to live my own life." Lucas began to tremble, his breathing quickening. "Mom, are you abandoning me?" Mary clenched her fists but didn't turn back. Lucas screamed, grabbing her shirt. "Mom. Please, don't leave me." He sobbed uncontrollably, his hands clinging to her as if letting go would mean losing her forever. Mary bit her lip, closing her eyes tightly. She shook off Lucas's hands, her voice icy. "You'll be fine. Goodbye, Lucas." Lucas collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down his face. He ran after her, but the iron gate slammed shut in front of him. "Mom. Come back. Mom." But Mary didn't turn around. She got into the car and disappeared into the night. Lucas crumpled, wailing in despair. He had been abandoned. Completely. No one loved him anymore. The middle-aged woman approached, looking down at Lucas with cold eyes. "Get up, kid. No one here likes crybabies." Lucas didn't hear anything anymore. He could only clutch his heart, where the pain was worse than anything he'd ever felt before. He whispered, his voice so soft that only he could hear it. "Mom, why did you abandon me?" No one answered. There was only a lonely child, abandoned in the cold darkness. Lucas sat huddled on the old iron bed, his eyes swollen and red from crying all night. The cramped room held more than 10 other children, their noisy chatter filling the air, but he no longer had the energy to care. An older boy, about 12 years old, approached him. He had messy black hair and sharp eyes. "Hey, kid, you the new one?" Lucas nodded, his voice hoarse, "Yeah." The boy sneered, turning to the other kids. "Hey, look at him. With that look, he's definitely a weakling." The group burst into laughter. Lucas lowered his head, clutching the edge of his shirt tightly. He wasn't used to this harshness. At home, no matter how distant his mom had been, at least he still had her. But now, there was no one by his side anymore. At noon that day, the meal was handed out. A plate of cold rice with a few wilted pieces of vegetables. Lucas stared at the tray, a bitter lump rising in his throat. He remembered the simple meals his mom used to make, poor, but at least warm. He was about to eat when a rough hand snatched the tray from him. Lucas looked up, and there stood the boy from earlier, Jack. Jack smirked, holding up the tray. "I changed my mind. Today, I want 2 portions." Lucas panicked, "That's mine." Jack tilted his head, his tone challenging. "Then take it back, you weakling." Lucas bit his lip, his small heart pounding. But he couldn't do anything. He was too weak. He was too scared. Jack laughed loudly, then walked off with Lucas's tray. Lucas just sat there, hands gripping his clothes, trying not to cry in front of them. He couldn't cry. In this place, if he was weak, he'd be crushed. Lucas couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mom turning her back and walking away, the iron gate slamming shut in front of him, and himself screaming in vain. He hugged his mom's old shirt tightly, asking himself, "Does mom miss me? Does she regret it?" There were no answers. Only a pitch-black void, accompanied by the chirping of insects outside the window. Lucas clutched the shirt tighter, burying his face in it. His mom's scent still lingered, but she was no longer here. The next morning, while Lucas was washing his face, Jack appeared again. He slapped Lucas's shoulder hard, making him stumble. "You're still holding on to that ragged old shirt? Planning to cling to it for life or what?" Lucas hugged the shirt tighter, avoiding Jack's gaze. Jack sneered, then yanked the shirt out of Lucas's hands. Lucas panicked, "Give it back to me." Jack held the shirt high, laughing gleefully. "You want it back? Then try and take it." Lucas jumped, trying to grab it, but he was too weak. Jack tossed the shirt to the floor and stomped on it. Lucas froze, his heart shattering. He collapsed to his knees, his eyes filled with despair. No one loved him anymore. Lucas didn't eat or talk to anyone all that day. He was starting to realize something. His mom wasn't coming back. No one needed him anymore. He was completely alone. In the days that followed, Lucas grew quiet. He didn't cry anymore, but he didn't smile either. He just sat in a corner, holding himself tightly. The other kids lost interest in bullying him. Because a child who didn't resist, didn't fight back, and showed no emotion was no longer fun. Lucas gradually faded into the shadows. One afternoon, Lucas stood by the window, gazing at the road in the distance. Every day, he waited for the impossible. He waited for his mom to come back. But he knew it would never happen. He whispered a question he didn't want to believe. "Did Mom never love me?" The wind blew through the window, carrying away his faint whispers. But it couldn't take away the pain in that little boy's heart. Lucas understood. He was alone in this world. And no one cared whether he lived or died. Lucas had begun to realize how cruel this world could be. At the orphanage, there was no love, no one to protect him, and no place for weak kids like him. The caretakers only cared about discipline, unbothered by who got beaten or tormented. The older kids made their own rules. Lucas became their favorite target. One afternoon, just as Lucas received his tray of food, Jack showed up again. "You again, weakling," his voice dripped with mockery. Lucas lowered his head, not responding. Jack glanced at the tray, then smirked at Lucas. "You know the rules, don't you?" Lucas gripped the tray tightly, his lips pressed into a thin line. Jack patted his head lightly, feigning friendliness. "Not gonna say anything? Or do you think you get to keep your meal today?" Lucas didn't want to lose his only meal, so he quietly stepped back, trying to get away from Jack. But Jack's foot shot out in front of him, tripping him. The tray in Lucas's hands fell to the ground, rice and vegetables spilling everywhere. The group of kids burst into laughter. Jack stepped onto the tray, crushing the food under his foot, then grinned. "Now no one gets a meal." Lucas stared at the ruined food on the dirty ground, his hands trembling. His heart pounded, his breathing quickened. Why is it like this? Why won't anyone help me? He clenched his fists, but he couldn't do anything. Because he was too weak. Because he had no one to protect him. That day, when Lucas was left alone in the yard, the pain hit again. His chest tightened, his breathing grew labored. "Don't pass out, don't." He leaned against the wall, his hands clutching his shirt tightly. But no one came to help. The other kids just watched from a distance, some even snickering. "He's putting on a show again. Acting like he's about to die." Lucas gritted his teeth, trying to endure the pain. Eventually, he made it through, but his body was growing weaker by the day. He knew, if he didn't get stronger, he would die in this place. That night, Lucas sat alone on his bed, his eyes empty. He stared at his small hands. He was too weak. He didn't want to live like this anymore. He had to change. Even without his mom, even with no one by his side, he still had to survive. He couldn't die in this place. Lucas clenched his fists, and for the first time in his life, he felt a clear determination. He wouldn't let anyone trample over him anymore. Lucas observed everything around him, learning how to avoid trouble. He didn't challenge anyone, nor did he try to fight back anymore. But he was no longer the boy who only bowed his head and endured. He quietly found ways to adapt. He learned to read, because he knew knowledge was the only way to escape this place. Whenever the other kids went to sleep, he sneaked down to the small library, borrowed books, and taught himself. Even when he was beaten, even when his food was taken, he didn't give up. Because he knew he had to become stronger. One day, Jack noticed that Lucas was no longer an easy target. "You think you can live here peacefully without following my rules?" Lucas looked at him calmly but said nothing. Jack smirked faintly, then suddenly punched Lucas straight in the stomach. Lucas doubled over, pain spreading through his body. But he didn't cry. Jack frowned. "You're not scared?" Lucas looked up, his eyes full of resolve. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Jack froze for a moment, then laughed menacingly. "Fine. I'll show you, there's no place here for stubborn kids." He kicked Lucas hard, but Lucas didn't make a sound. The other kids stood around, but no one stepped in. Because everyone knew the rule of the orphanage. The weak get weeded out. Lucas clutched his stomach, his whole body aching. But he didn't give up. He had endured enough. From that day on, Lucas was no longer the weak little boy. He started training his body, even though it wouldn't allow much. He practiced running, practiced breathing, to keep his heart from weakening further. He learned to protect himself, learned to read books to find a way out of this place. He no longer let despair swallow him whole. Because he had decided. He wouldn't die here. He wouldn't fall like his mother once did. One night, Lucas dreamed of his mom. She held him in her arms, whispering in his ear. "I'm sorry, Lucas." He smiled in his dream, but when he woke up, there was only the cold darkness. Lucas slowly closed his eyes again, whispering one last sentence. "Mom. I won't wait for you anymore." From that moment, Lucas completely let go of the past. He would live, but not to wait for anyone anymore. Years passed, and Lucas was no longer the weak, easily bullied boy. He learned how to survive, how to protect himself. Though his body remained frail, though his heart condition was always a threat, his will could no longer be easily broken. The beatings from Jack and the other kids no longer frightened him. Each time he fell, he stood up stronger. He didn't resist pointlessly, but he no longer bowed his head in submission either. Lucas knew that if he wanted to escape the orphanage, he needed something to rely on. He had no parents, no one to shield him. But he had his mind. Every night, when everyone else was asleep, Lucas sneaked down to the library, reading every worn-out book he could find. He read about the human body, about medicine, about heart conditions. He wanted to understand his own illness, to know why he was born so weak. He didn't want to be someone whose fate was decided for him anymore. One day, Jack caught Lucas reading in the library. He smirked, snatching the book from Lucas's hands. "What the hell are you doing?" Lucas stayed calm, his voice steady. "Reading." Jack looked at the book's title and burst into mocking laughter. "You think studying to be a doctor will change your fate? Keep dreaming." Lucas met his gaze steadily, his voice firm. "I'm not dreaming. I'll make it happen." Jack sneered, then suddenly threw the book to the ground and stomped on it. "Listen up, Lucas. You're just an abandoned kid, a useless guy with a busted heart. You think anyone cares what you'll do?" Lucas didn't reply, only quietly bent down to pick up the book. He brushed off the dust and walked away without a word. He didn't need to prove anything to them. He would prove it with his actions. Though his will was strong, Lucas's body couldn't betray the truth. The heart pain still came unexpectedly, bringing him to his knees. But each time, he gritted his teeth and endured, refusing to let anyone see his weakness. "As long as I'm still breathing, I won't stop." That was the promise he made to himself every day. One day, Mr. Ferdinand, a volunteer teacher at the orphanage, caught Lucas reading a book. He approached, curiosity in his voice. "What are you reading, kid?" Lucas looked up, a bit wary. "A medical book." Ferdinand glanced at the page, surprised. "You understand this stuff?" Lucas nodded, his tone serious. "I'm teaching myself. I want to become a doctor." Ferdinand smiled kindly, his eyes warm. "Is that so? That's a beautiful dream." Lucas was taken aback. No one had ever told him his dream was beautiful. He was used to mockery and scorn. But Ferdinand didn't laugh at him. From that day on, Ferdinand started paying more attention to Lucas. He gave him new books, guided him through things he didn't understand. For the first time, Lucas felt something he'd forgotten long ago, genuine care from another person. Not pity. Not pretense. Just someone who believed he could do it. After years of being beaten down, Lucas finally had a path. He was no longer lost about his future. He would become a doctor. He would save weak kids like himself. And most importantly, he would never let the past drag him down again. He would live for himself. One night, Lucas sat alone, looking up at the starry sky. He remembered the old days, when his mom still held him in her arms. Those memories felt so distant now. He no longer resented her. But he no longer hoped for anything from her either. His mom had chosen her own path. And he would choose his own too. Without her. Without the past. Just a new Lucas, stronger, no longer bound by old pain. When Lucas turned 18, he left the orphanage with a bag of old clothes and a few coins. No one saw him off. No one cared where he was going. Jack, the one who had tormented him for years, smirked as he watched Lucas walk out the gate. "You think you can make it out there? This world isn't for guys like you, Lucas." Lucas looked him straight in the eye, his voice calm. "I'm never coming back here." Jack didn't reply, only watched Lucas's retreating figure, a flicker of unease in his eyes. And so Lucas left, never once looking back. Life out there was far from easy. Lucas had no money, no one to help him, nothing but his determination and the knowledge he'd taught himself. He sought out a small hospital, hoping to find any kind of work. "Do you have any experience?" an elderly nurse asked. Lucas nodded, handing over the notes he'd written over the years. The nurse opened the notebook, surprised to see neat handwriting in meticulously detailed anatomical sketches. "You taught yourself all of this?" Lucas nodded, his eyes full of resolve. "I want to become a doctor." The nurse studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "Good. We always need people with will, power like you." And so, Lucas began his first job at the hospital, a lowly assistant in the emergency room. The work was grueling and stressful. Lucas did everything, from cleaning to bandaging wounds to observing surgeries. The doctors barely noticed him, they saw him as just a temporary worker. But Lucas didn't give up. Every night after his shift, he sneaked into the hospital library, studying page after page of medical texts. He took notes, redrew body parts, and researched heart conditions, the illness that had plagued him his entire life. He worked twice, 3 times harder than anyone else. Because he knew if he fell, no one would pick him up. One day, Dr. Carl Rivera, the stern and demanding head of surgery, happened to catch Lucas reading in the library. "What are you doing here so late?" he asked, his tone displeased. Lucas flinched but answered calmly. "I'm studying. I want to understand more about heart surgeries." Carl narrowed his eyes, glancing at the notes on the table. He picked up a sheet, noticing the anatomical drawings sketched with astonishing precision. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Tomorrow, you're coming with me into the operating room." Lucas's eyes widened. "Really, sir?" Carl nodded, his voice serious. "I want to see how fast you can learn." Lucas felt his heart race, not from his condition, but from hope, for the first time in his life. The next morning, Lucas stood beside Dr. Carl, dressed in white scrubs, his eyes fixed intently ahead. Before him lay a patient with heart failure, stretched out on the operating table. Carl turned to Lucas, asking an unexpected question. "Tell me, if it were up to you, what would you do first?" Lucas didn't hesitate, answering immediately. "First, you'd need to check the coronary arteries to determine the extent of the blockage. If the patient's at risk of cardiac arrest, you'd need to place a stent or perform a coronary artery bypass." Carl was slightly taken aback but said nothing. He gave a faint nod and continued the procedure. But inwardly, he was beginning to acknowledge this young man. After the surgery, Lucas stood on the hospital rooftop, gazing out at the windy sky. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged somewhere. No longer the abandoned child. No longer the weakling trampled underfoot. He had found his path. And his mother. Lucas no longer thought about her. No more hatred. No more waiting. Just an endless emptiness. One day, while Lucas was working, a nurse called him to the emergency room. "Dr. Lucas, we have a critical patient." Lucas rushed over, but when he saw the person on the bed, he froze. The woman lay there, her face gaunt, her hair grayed considerably, her body thin and frail. Lucas felt as though the entire world collapsed in a single second. That patient. It was his mother. Lucas had closed the door on his past, but the past had never let him go. The mother who had abandoned him was now lying there, waiting for a miracle. And Lucas? Would he save her, or would he let her face the consequences of what she had done? Lucas stood frozen. Before him, the woman lay on the hospital bed, her body emaciated, her skin pale, her eyes shut tight, her breathing faint. Dr. Carl, the head of the department, approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay, Lucas?" Lucas swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the woman on the bed. Mary. The one who had abandoned him. The one who had turned her back on him in his desperation. And now, she needed his help. A nurse rushed in, her voice urgent. "The patient's name is Mary Lewis, 52 years old. End-stage heart failure, body weakened from prolonged malnutrition." Lucas gave a faint, bitter smile in his mind. Heart failure? How ironic that the woman who had once abandoned her son with a heart condition was now battling the same illness herself. Mary slowly opened her eyes. She looked around, her face filled with shock and fear. She whispered hoarsely. Where am I?" Lucas answered calmly, his voice devoid of emotion. "You're in the hospital." Mary blinked, then slowly turned toward him. When her eyes met Lucas's, the world seemed to freeze. She was stunned, her lips trembling. "Lucas, is that you?" Lucas didn't respond, only stared at her. Mary tried to sit up, but the pain in her chest forced her back down, her breathing labored. "No, it can't be," she murmured, as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. Lucas clenched his fists, his voice as cold as ice. "It's been a long time, hasn't it, Mom?" Mary burst into tears, water streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Please, forgive me. I know I was wrong." Lucas let out a faint, emotionless laugh, his eyes unwavering. "You're only realizing that now?" Mary grabbed his hand, her voice choked with sobs. "I have no one left, Lucas. Richard left me. I've lost everything. I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" Lucas pulled his hand away, his tone sharp and frigid. "Who do you think I am? A child still waiting for his mother to come back?" Mary froze, her face pale. Lucas stepped back, looking down at the woman who had once been his entire world but had also destroyed his childhood. "You left me once. Now it's my turn." Carl, standing nearby, watched Lucas with an unreadable expression. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Lucas took a deep breath, then answered firmly. "I'll save her." Mary looked up, her eyes wide with shock. You'll save me?" Lucas stared at her, his gaze still icy. "I'm a doctor. And I don't abandon patients." Mary broke down sobbing, reaching for his hand again, but Lucas had already turned away. He was no longer the little boy who had once begged for her embrace. He wasn't doing this for her. He did it for himself. A week later, the surgery took place. Lucas stood in the operating room, his gaze utterly focused. Carl led the procedure, but he allowed Lucas to participate in every critical step. "Lucas, it's your call now. Do we replace the heart valve or try to repair it?" Lucas looked at the cardiovascular monitor, his voice steady. "Replace it. If we just repair it, the risk of recurrence will be too high." Carl nodded with satisfaction, then signaled to proceed. Everything unfolded in absolute silence, broken only by the steady beeping of the heart monitor. And then, "The heart is functioning stably," another doctor announced. The surgery was a success. 2 days later, Mary woke up in the recovery room. She opened her eyes, staring at the stark white ceiling, then slowly turned her head to search for Lucas. He was standing near the window, arms crossed over his chest. Mary burst into tears. "You're still here," Lucas didn't respond, his expression eerily calm. Mary reached out toward him, her voice trembling. "Lucas. Please, give me a chance. Lucas looked at her for a long time, then slowly walked over. He placed his hand on hers and whispered. Your chance ran out a long time ago. Mary froze, her eyes widening in shock. Lucas let go of her hand, turned, and walked away. Lucas had saved his mother, but he couldn't salvage the past. Mary wanted forgiveness, but was there any chance left for her? The story would reach its conclusion in the next continuation. Mary had survived. After the surgery, she could feel her heart beating more steadily, a sensation she thought she'd never experience again. But the one thing that left her breathless wasn't her heart condition, it was Lucas's gaze. That look no longer held hatred, but it also no longer held love. It was cold, distant, as if an unbridgeable chasm stretched between them. One day, Lucas stepped into her hospital room. Mary panicked, hurriedly sitting up. Lucas, you're here. Lucas gave a slight nod but didn't come closer. Mary clutched the blanket tightly, her lips trembling. I want to talk to you. Lucas remained silent, waiting. Mary broke down crying, her voice choked. I know I was wrong. I know I abandoned you, caused unforgivable things. But please, Lucas, I have no one left. Lucas tightened his fist slightly, his tone calm. What do you want me to do? Forget the past. Mary sobbed, shaking her head. No. I wouldn't dare ask that. I want you to give me a chance. I've lost everything, Lucas, I have nothing left. Lucas gave a faint, emotionless laugh, his eyes blank. Did you ever think that I, too, once lost everything? Mary stiffened, staring at her son in silence. Lucas took a step forward, his voice low but sharp as a blade. You say you have no one left, but you once had me. You say you've lost everything, but you once had a family. And yet you threw it all away with your own hands. Mary broke down, burying her face in her hands. Lucas took a deep breath and continued. I once begged you not to abandon me. But you didn't hesitate. You didn't even look back. Mary clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face. I regret it. I truly regret it. Lucas closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, then opened them to look straight at her. But now, does regret even mean anything? Mary couldn't answer. She could only cry, because she understood that some mistakes could never be undone. After a long silence, Lucas spoke calmly. I saved you. Not because you're my mother. But because I'm a doctor. Mary pressed her lips together, unable to meet her son's eyes. Lucas continued, his voice low but resolute. You want me to forgive you? I don't hate you anymore, but I can't see you as my mother either. Mary froze, her face turning pale. Lucas. I'm begging you. Lucas stood up, giving her one final look. You have to face your own past. I can't help you do that. Then he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Mary alone with her overwhelming regret. After being discharged, Mary tried to reach out to Lucas, but he never responded. She went to the hospital, standing outside for hours just hoping to see him. But Lucas never came out to meet her. One day, Carl saw Mary sitting on a bench in front of the hospital. He sighed, walked over, and asked. What are you still waiting for? Mary looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Just to talk to my son, even if it's just one more time. Carl looked at her for a long moment, then said slowly. Lucas has been through too much pain. He survived without you. Now, he doesn't want to look back at the past anymore. Mary covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. She had lost her only son, and there was nothing she could do to change that. Mary knew Lucas would never come back to her. But she wanted to do something to atone, even if just a little. She sought out children's shelters, spending her final days helping orphans' children like Lucas had once been. She spent the rest of her life trying to make amends, though she knew it would never be enough. Lucas never saw his mother again. He continued his work as a doctor, saving other patients. He lived a meaningful life, never looking back. One day, as he stood on the hospital balcony, Carl approached him and said gently, "Have you ever thought about seeing your mother again?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "The past is closed." Carl nodded, saying nothing more. The two stood in silence, gazing at the distant horizon. Lucas knew he had let go of everything. He was no longer the child who had once begged for love. He was no longer bound by the pain of the past. Now, he had only the road ahead, and he would keep moving forward without ever turning back. Mary lost everything because of her wrong choices. Lucas overcame his past, living a life full of meaning. He didn't hold a grudge, but he didn't forget either. The story didn't have a completely happy ending, but it was a fair one. Because some mistakes can't be erased, and some wounds never fully heal. The story is a profound lesson about love, forgiveness, and the consequences of wrong choices. Mary, in pursuit of fame and money, abandoned her only son, only to spend her final days in regret and loneliness. Lucas, despite enduring immense suffering, rose above it with resilience, refusing to let the past drag him down. He forgave but didn't forget, because some mistakes can't be fixed. The story reminds us that family is the most precious thing, and once lost, it may never be regained.